The fog that rolls through McDowell County in the early hours of the morning doesn't feel like weather. It feels like a living thing, a heavy, wet blanket that settles over the hollows and the creeks, muffling the world before the sun has the courage to rise. It was 4 a.m, a time when the rest of the world was dreaming. But for Elias Thorne, it was the start of another battle. Elias sat on the edge of his bed, the mattress groaning under his weight. The air in the room was cold, seeping in through the cracks in the window frame that he had been promising Martha he would fix for 3 years now. But there was never enough time. There was only the shift. Elias looked at his hands. They were thick, calloused, and permanently stained with the shadow of coal dust. No amount of scrubbing with heavy grit soap ever truly got it out. It was in his pores. It was in his skin. It was, he often thought, in his very soul. He flexed his fingers, feeling the arthritis bite back at him, a sharp reminder of 30 years spent crawling on his knees in the dark. He coughed, a dry, rattling sound that shook his chest, and quickly stifled it with a handkerchief so as not to wake Martha. She was sleeping soundly beside him, her breathing a soft rhythm that anchored him to the earth. He looked at her face, softened by sleep and the dim light of the street lamp outside. She was the reason he went down. She was the reason he came back up. Elias stood up slowly, his knees popping, and moved to the kitchen. The linoleum floor was ice cold against his bare feet. He started the coffee pot, the smell of burnt grounds and chicory soon filling the small house. This was the ritual, the silence of the house before the chaos of the mine. He packed his lunch pail with the precision of a surgeon, a bologna sandwich on white bread, an apple that had seen better days, and a thermos of black coffee strong enough to strip paint. He snapped the metal latch shut. That sound, the sharp metallic click, was the period at the end of his morning piece. It signaled that Elias the husband was clocking out, and Elias the miner was clocking in. He put on his work boots, lacing them tight, pulling the leather until it bit into his ankles. He grabbed his jacket and his helmet from the hook by the door. He paused for a moment, his hand on the doorknob, looking back at the hallway that led to the bedroom. A strange feeling washed over him, a heaviness in his gut that had nothing to do with the breakfast he hadn't eaten. It was a premonition, perhaps, or maybe just the fatigue of a man who had spent too much time fighting the geology of the earth. He shook it off. Superstitious nonsense, he told himself. A miner couldn't afford to be spooky. He stepped out into the pre-dawn chill, the air smelling of sulfur and wet leaves. His truck, a rusted Ford that had survived almost as much as he had, sat in the driveway. The engine turned over with a reluctant cough, mirroring his own, before roaring to life. The drive to the Black Dog Mine was a journey through a ghost world. The headlights cut through the fog, illuminating the twisting roads that snaked through the mountains. These hills were ancient. They were here long before men with pickaxes and dynamite, and they would be here long after. Elias respected the mountain. You had to. If you didn't respect it, it would kill you. It was that simple. The Black Dog was a deep drift mine, tapping into the Pocahontas No. 3 seam, some of the highest quality metallurgical coal in the world. But it was deep, and the roof was known to be tender. That was the company word for it. The miners called it Widow. As he pulled into the gravel lot, the towering silhouette of the tipple rose against the graying sky like a cathedral of industry. The noise was already there, the low hum of the ventilation fans, the clatter of the conveyor belts, the shouting of men. Elias parked and walked toward the bathhouse, his lunch pail swinging by his side. The bathhouse was the transition zone. It was loud, filled with the smell of sweat, stale tobacco, and damp clothes. Men were changing, their lockers slamming shut, their voices carrying the rough banter that masked the underlying tension. "Morning!" Elias called out a voice. It was Big Jim, a man the size of a door frame. "Morning." "Jim, how's the back?" Elias asked, moving to his locker. "Still there. Still hurting. Same as yesterday." Jim laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. Beside Elias's locker was a young kid, no older than 19. His name was Toby. He was new, a red hat, green as grass and twice as soft. He was struggling with his belt, his hands shaking slightly. Elias watched him for a moment. He remembered being that young. He remembered the terror of that first descent. "Easy there, son," Elias said quietly. "The coal ain't going nowhere. It's waited 300 million years. It can wait 5 more minutes." Toby looked up, his eyes wide. "Yes, sir, Mr. Thorne." "Just Just nervous, I guess." "Don't be nervous," Elias said, placing a heavy hand on the boy's shoulder. "Be careful. Nervous makes you twitchy. Careful keeps you alive. You stick with me today. You watch the roof, not your feet. You listen to the timber. If it talks, you move." The boy nodded, swallowing hard. They finished dressing, clipping their heavy battery packs to their belts and adjusting their headlamps. The lamps were their lifeline. Without them, the darkness underground was absolute. It was a darkness you could feel, a physical weight that pressed against your eyes. They moved to the cage, the elevator that would drop them 600 feet into the belly of the earth. The men packed in tight, shoulder to shoulder. The smell of chewing tobacco and unwashed bodies was intense. The cage boss gave the signal, and the floor dropped out from under them. The descent was rapid, the air pressure changing in their ears. Down, down, down. The light of the surface world disappeared, replaced by the yellow beams of their cap lamps dancing on the wet, dripping walls of the shaft. When the cage hit the bottom, the world changed. The air was cool and damp, carrying the metallic tamps of coal dust and rock dust. This was the pit. This was the domain of the rat and the miner. Elias led Toby toward the mantrip, the low-riding rail car that would take them 3 miles back to the working face. The ride was jarring, the metal wheels screeching on the tracks. They passed crosscuts and abandoned sections, dark holes that looked like mouths waiting to swallow them. Elias sat with his head down, conserving his energy. He thought about the bills sitting on his kitchen table, the electric bill, the gas bill, the payment for the truck. It was a never-ending cycle. You dug the coal to get the money to pay the bills to have the strength to dig the coal. He was tired, deeply, in his bones tired, but he had 5 years left until he could draw his full pension. 5 years. He could do 5 years. He had to. The mantrip jerked to a halt. They grabbed their gear and began the walk to the face. The ceiling here was low, maybe 4 feet high. They had to walk in a crouch, the miner's stoop. For a young man like Toby, It was uncomfortable. For Elias, it was agony. His knees burned. His back screamed, but he kept moving, his pace steady and rhythmic. They reached the continuous miner, a massive beast of a machine with a spinning drum of steel teeth that chewed the coal directly from the seam. The noise when it started up was deafening, a roar that vibrated your teeth. Dust filled the air instantly, a black fog that the water sprays couldn't fully suppress. Elias took his position, checking the roof bolts. His job was to ensure the ceiling didn't come down while the machine ate the wall. He tapped the rock with his sounding rod. Thud. Thud. Solid. Thock. Hollow. He frowned. "Hold up!" he signaled, waving his light. He grabbed the roof bolter and moved in, drilling a 6-foot steel rod into the stone, binding the layers together. He looked at Toby. "See that?" he yelled over the roar. That hollow sound, that's death knocking. You pin it up, or you don't go home. Toby nodded, his face already streaked with black. The shift wore on. Hour after grueling hour, the darkness was broken only by the beams of light and the sparks from the cutting head. They stopped for lunch, sitting on a pile of timber in a crosscut. Elias opened his pail. He wiped his hands on his pants, but the cold dust remained. He picked up his sandwich, leaving black fingerprints on the white bread. He ate it anyway. You ate the coal. It was part of the deal. "Why do you do it, Mr. Thorne?" Toby asked, taking a swig from his water jug. "Why do you stay down here?" Elias chewed slowly, swallowing hard. "It's what I know, son. My daddy mined this coal. His daddy mined it. It puts clothes on my wife's back, and food in the cupboard. It's honest work. It's hard work," Toby said, looking at the low ceiling. "Hardest there is," Elias agreed, "but there's a pride in it. We keep the lights on. Boy, up there, in the cities, in the skyscrapers. They don't know us. They don't see us. But they need us. Every time they flip a switch, that's our sweat, powering it. That means something." He didn't tell the boy about the fear. He didn't tell him about the nightmares where the ceiling lowered slowly until it crushed him. He kept that to himself. The afternoon wore on. They were nearing the end of the shift. The continuous miner had carved out a deep room, and they were retreating, pulling the pillars. This was the most dangerous part of mining. You take the coal that supports the roof, and you let the roof fall. Behind you, in a controlled collapse, it was a dance with gravity. Elias was watching the roof. Like a hawk, the geology here was shifting. He could see the stress fractures in the slate. "All right, let's back it out." The section boss yelled, "Move the buggy!" As the shuttle car reversed, a deep, guttural groan echoed through the chamber. It wasn't the machine, it was the earth. Elias froze. He knew that sound. It was the sound of a mountain changing its mind. "Run!" Elias screamed, grabbing Toby by the harness. "Move! Move!" The air pressure spiked, a wind rushing past them as the roof behind them slammed down. But it didn't stop there. The collapse chased them. The timber props snapped like toothpicks. Crack, bang, boom. The noise was louder than thunder, louder than war. Dust billowed out. a solid wall of blackness. Elias shoved Toby into a small crosscut, a safety niche cut into the coal rib, and threw his body over the boy. The world ended in noise and violence. Rocks slammed into the floor just feet away. The ground shook so hard Elias bit his tongue, the taste of copper mixing with the coal dust, and then, as quickly as it had started, it stopped. The roaring silence that followed was worse than the noise. The dust was so thick they couldn't breathe. Elias pulled his shirt over his nose and mouth. "Stay down," he wheezed. "Don't move. Let the dust settle." They lay there in the absolute dark. The collapse had knocked out the power cable to the section. The heavy machinery was silent. The fans were silent. Elias reached up and clicked his cap lamp. A weak beam cut through the swirling dust. He turned his head. The tunnel they had come from was gone. It was blocked by a massive wall of fallen sandstone and slate. He turned the other way. Blocked. They were trapped. A space maybe 20 feet long and 10 feet wide. A tomb. "Mr. Thorne." Toby's voice was a high-pitched whimper. "I'm here, son. I'm right here." Elias sat up, wincing. His shoulder throbbed where a piece of rock had grazed him. He checked the boy. No blood. Just terror. Are we dead?" Toby asked. "Not yet," Elias said, his voice steady, though his heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. "We're boxed in." "But they know we're here." They heard that fall clear back to the portal. "The rescue team is already suiting up." Elias moved to the wall of rock. He tapped on it with his wrench. It was solid. Thousands of tons of rock between them and the world. He checked the air. It was still dead. No ventilation. That was the real danger. Methane or carbon monoxide? Or just running out of oxygen? "Turn your light off," Elias commanded. "Why?" "Save the battery. We don't know how long we'll be here. We use one light at a time." Low beam. Toby fumbled with his switch, and the darkness closed in, relieved only by the dim glow of Elias's lamp. They sat on the cold floor, backs against the coal rib. The reality of the situation began to settle in. This was the nightmare. This was the thing Martha prayed against every Sunday at the Baptist church. Elias checked his watch. 3 p.m. The shift was technically over. Up above, the sun was shining. Men were walking to their cars. "My mom," Toby whispered. "She's gonna be waiting dinner." "She wait?" Elias said. "Mothers wait. It's what they do." He wanted to comfort the boy, but what could he say? He knew the odds. If the ventilation was cut, the gas would build up. If the roof was unstable, a secondary fall could finish them. "Tell me about her," Elias said. "Keep talking." "Uses less air than crying." Toby said. She ... She makes this meatloaf, puts brown sugar in the sauce. It's real good, and she always sings when she does the dishes. Patsy Cline. She loves Patsy Cline. That sounds nice, Elias said, closing his eyes. He thought of Martha. He thought of the way she hummed when she ironed his shirts. He thought of the argument they had 2 days ago about money. It seemed so stupid now, So incredibly small. "I'm sorry, Martha," he whispered into the dark. Time lost its meaning. Was it an hour? 5 hours? The air began to feel heavy, thick. Elias could feel a headache starting behind his eyes. Bad air. Carbon dioxide building up. "Toby," Elias said, shaking the boy who had started to drift off. "Stay awake. You gotta breathe deep. Slow and deep. I'm tired, Mr. Thorne, I know. But you can't sleep. Not yet." Elias forced himself to stand up. He walked the length of their prison. 6 paces. Turn. 6 paces. Turn. He tapped on the roof bolt. It was holding. For now. He thought about the men outside. Big Jim would be on the rescue team. He knew that for a fact. Jim would be tearing at that rock with his bare hands if he had to. But Rock was stubborn. Rock didn't care about friendship. Elias sat back down. He felt the weight of the mountain above him. 300 million years of history pressing down on his chest. He felt a strange connection to it. He had spent his life stealing from this mountain, and now the mountain had swallowed him. It felt almost fair. Almost. But then he looked at Toby. The kid was just starting. He hadn't lived yet. He hadn't loved a woman, raised a child, built a home. It wasn't fair for him. "Listen to me, Toby," Elias said, his voice raspy. "When they come, ... and they will come, you stay behind me. If there's a hole, you go through first. You hear me?" "But, Mr. Thorne, no buts. I've had my time. You got a lot of meatloaf left to eat." The light on Elias's helmet flickered. It was dying. "Switch yours on," Elias said. Toby clicked a switch. "Nothing. It's not working, Elias. I think I broke it when we fell." Darkness. Absolute, total darkness. The kind of black that has weight. Elias felt his heart skip a beat. This was it. The blindness. Now the demons would come. The hallucinations. "It's okay," Elias lied. "Just close your eyes. Can't see in the dark anyway. Imagine the kitchen. Imagine that meatloaf. Smell it." Elias reached out and found the boy's hand. He gripped it tight. A lifeline in the void. They sat in silence for a long time. Elias began to see things, flashes of light that weren't there. He heard his son's voice, the son who had moved to Ohio 10 years ago. He heard the sound of rain on a tin roof. He drifted in and out of consciousness. The air was getting thinner. His chest heaved, trying to pull oxygen from the stone. He knew the signs: hypoxia, the gentle sleep. "Toby," he croaked. No answer. "Toby." He squeezed the hand. A faint squeeze back. "Good. Still there." Elias started to pray. He wasn't a overly religious man, but in the bottom of a mine, everyone finds God. He prayed for Martha to be okay. He prayed for the boy. He prayed for a breath of cool, fresh air. And then he heard it. A vibration. Not a groan of the earth, but a rhythmic, mechanical thrum. Thump. 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 He pressed his ear to the coal seam. Sound travels through coal faster than air. It was a drill. "Toby! Wake up!" Elias shook the boy violently. "They're drilling. They're coming." The sound grew louder. It was the most beautiful music Elias had ever heard. It meant they knew where they were. It meant the world hadn't forgotten them. Oars passed, the sound of the drill stopped. Then a voice, muffled, distant, but human. "Hello? Can you hear me?" It was coming through a probe hole, a small pipe drilled through the rubble. "We're here!" Elias screamed, his voice cracking. "Two of us. We need air. Stand by. Air is coming." A hiss, and then a stream of cool, compressed air shot into their tomb. It smelled like oil and rubber, but to Elias it smelled like lilacs. It smelled like life. He gulped it down, feeling his head clear. He dragged Toby to the pipe. "Breathe, son. Breathe." It took another 6 hours for the rescue team to dig them out. 6 hours of moving rock by hand, terrified of causing another collapse. When the light of the rescue team's lamps finally broke through the wall, Elias wept. He wasn't ashamed. He let the tears cut tracks through the coal dust on his face. Big Jim was the first one through. He grabbed Elias in a bear hug that cracked his ribs. "I told you I'd get you out, you old mule," Jim choked out. They loaded Toby onto a stretcher. The kid was weak, but he was alive. Elias refused the stretcher. Walked out. He leaned heavily on Jim, but walked. The ride back to the surface was a blur, but when the cage rose up and broke the surface, the sensation was overwhelming. It was night time. The floodlights of the Manya were blinding, but beyond them he saw the stars and the people. Crowd at the gate was silent as they emerged, and then a cheer went up. A ragged, beautiful cheer. Elias scanned the faces. He saw the wives, the mothers, the children, and then he saw Martha. She was standing by the ambulance, face pale, clutching her shawl. She broke through the line and ran to him. Kohat, burying his face in her neck. She smelled of laundry, detergent, and fear. "I'm here, Martha," he whispered. "I'm here." "I thought, double quote," she sobbed. I know. Elias looked over her shoulder. He saw Toby's mother hugging her son, weeping with joy. He saw the mountain looming in the darkness, silent and indifferent. It had spared him this time. He knew, with a sudden, crystal clarity, that he would never go back down. It was done. The mountain had taken his youth, his strength, and his health. It wasn't getting his ghost. Not yet. Elias looked at his hands, still black with the dust of the deep earth. He wiped a tear from Martha's cheek, leaving a smudge of soot on her pale skin. "Let's go home," he said. "I'm fixing that window tomorrow." 10 years later, Elias sat on his porch. The cough was worse now, the black lung finally claiming its due. He couldn't walk far without losing his breath. But the window was fixed. The house was paid for. He watched the sun set over the ridge, turning the sky a bruised purple. A truck pulled into the driveway. A man got out, still wearing his mining stripes. his face covered in the familiar black dust. It was Toby. He was a foreman now, a section boss. He walked up the steps, holding a paper bag. "Evening, Elias," Toby said, his voice deeper, rougher than the boy who had cried in the dark. "Evening, Toby. How's the seam?" "Mean. Real mean. But we got our Toby sat down on the swing next to him. He pulled 2 bottles of root beer from the bag. He cracked one open and handed it to Elias. "Thinking about that day?" Toby asked, looking out at the hills. "Always am," Elias said. "You ever regret it?" "Going back in?" Toby took a long drink. "Sometimes. But it's what I know. It's who we are, Elias. We keep the lights on." Elias nodded. He took a sip of the cold soda. He looked at the younger man, saw the lines starting to form around his eyes, the permanent grime under his fingernails. It was a hard life, a brutal life, but there was dignity in it. There was a brotherhood that the rest of the world would never understand. They were the men of the deep, the soldiers of the carbon seams, and as long as the mountains stood, there would be men like them, willing to brave the dark to bring up the fire. Elias closed his eyes and listened to the wind in the trees. It sounded like a whisper. It sounded like the earth saying, "Rest now. You've done your part." And for the first time in a long time, Elias Thorne felt truly at peace. The darkness of the mine was a memory, but the light of the porch, the taste of the root beer, and the presence of the man whose life he had saved, that was real. That was the legacy. Not the coal, but the life that continued after the coal was burned.